For years, they stayed quiet. But now, Princess Anne and King Charles are ready to expose everything about Camilla, about the crown, and about the Queen's final wishes. What started as whispers has turned into open war behind royal walls. It all exploded at a Buckingham Palace banquet. In a room full of dignitaries, Princess Anne stood up and, in front of everyone, addressed Camilla not as Queen, but as Queen Consort. The distinction wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, a public correction, and a public humiliation. Anne didn't stop there. With chilling calm, she reminded Camilla that Queen Elizabeth never approved her as queen, only as consort. She even told her outright, "Her Majesty made it clear, you are Queen Consort." That's what the people were promised. The silence in the room was louder than any outburst. Camilla was frozen. The royals were stunned. But this wasn't just royal drama. This was a warning, because Anne knew something the world didn't. In the Queen's final days, Anne had a private conversation with her mother, one that made her promise to protect the integrity of the crown. And now, watching Camilla slowly edge into a role never intended for her, Anne made the decision to speak out. Charles, caught between his mother's wishes and his wife's ambition, stood motionless. The man who wore the crown now had to choose: preserve his mother's legacy or defend the woman he loves. His silence? Deafening. And the implications? Unavoidable. Inside the palace, this wasn't seen as a disagreement. It was a declaration. Anne had fired the first shot. The carefully maintained image of a united royal family was shattered in one moment of truth. And as whispers turn into questions and questions into headlines, the monarchy faces something it hasn't seen in years: an internal war playing out in front of the world. But what pushed Anne to break royal silence so publicly? The answer lies deeper in betrayal, legacy, and a truth only she and the Queen knew. This wasn't just palace politics, it was personal. And the bitter roots of this royal feud stretch far deeper than the public ever realized. Long before Camilla wore a crown, or even imagined herself seated beside a king, she crossed a line that would haunt the royal family for decades. That line was Princess Anne. And the man between them wasn't Charles. It was Andrew Parker Bowles. In brief, the earliest chapters of Anne's adult life, Andrew was more than a companion. He was a rare constant in a life ruled by duty, tradition, and surveillance. Friends whispered that they were in love, perhaps even destined for marriage. But there was a problem, one that even Anne couldn't overcome. Andrew was Catholic, and, in a monarchy bound to the Church of England, Anne could not marry outside of it. The crown made the decision for her. Not with cruelty, but with cold finality. She let him go. She had no choice. But letting go didn't mean forgetting. Years later, when Camilla married Andrew, something broke in Anne. It wasn't just that. Camilla married her former love. It was that she did so with ease, without the pressures of royalty dictating her path. And then, years later, still Camilla would do the unthinkable again. She would marry Charles, the very man Anne had sworn to protect, the brother she had guided through scandal and loss. To Anne, this wasn't romance. It was betrayal on betrayal. It was history repeating itself, with Camilla always at the center of the storm. At Charles and Camilla's wedding in 2005, the atmosphere spoke volumes. The Queen and Prince Philip stood apart from the couple on the chapel steps, their expressions restrained, their presence polite but distant. And then there was Anne, stone-faced, unmoved, and cold. Her body language betrayed her composure. It wasn't bitterness. It was something far more cutting: dismissal. Camilla may have married into the family, but she had not earned Anne's respect. Even after the wedding, Anne never distanced herself from Andrew. Their bond remained intact. She made it clear that her history with him was not one she would bury to spare Camilla's discomfort. In fact, it was rumored that Camilla often felt unsettled by Anne and Andrew's continued closeness, a quiet rivalry pulsing beneath the surface of every palace event. But it wasn't until Camilla began, using the title Queen, that Anne finally broke her silence publicly. Refusing to curtsy to Camilla wasn't just rebellion, it was strategy, a defiance rooted in royal protocol itself. Anne wasn't just angry, she had grounds. According to the precedents of the royal family rule, princesses born into the family outrank those who marry into it. And Anne, the only daughter of Queen Elizabeth, made it very clear she would never bow to someone she believed had taken everything from her, including her past, her brother, and her mother's crown. But this wasn't just about past heartbreak. Anne's words came with authority, and were backed by something far more shocking. Before her final breath, Queen Elizabeth made one thing crystal clear, but the world was never supposed to know. Behind closed doors, in the stillness of her final days, the Queen shared a conviction she carried with quiet dignity. Camilla was never meant to be queen. She was to be Queen Consort, nothing more, nothing less. It was a distinction Elizabeth insisted on, not out of spite, but out of respect for the monarchy, the people, and the memory of Diana. And though the statement was never written in public record, those closest to her remember it. Some even say she whispered it more than once, just to make sure it wouldn't be lost in the noise that would follow her death. Princess Anne was one of the few who heard those words directly, and she never forgot them. In a rare private moment with Camilla long before the Queen's passing, Anne reportedly said it outright, "You are not queen, you are Queen Consort." That is what she wanted. To Camilla, it may have sounded like an insult. But to Anne, it was a defensive legacy. The Queen had spent 70 years preserving the monarchy's image, and Camilla, with her complex history and public baggage, was not meant to change that with a single title. But the moment Queen Elizabeth passed, everything shifted. The nation mourned, the crown changed hands, and quietly, Camilla dropped the word consort. No formal announcement, no clarification, just a subtle rebranding that echoed through royal announcements, news headlines, and press releases. To the public, it was just an evolution. But to Anne, it was treachery. And when the regal banquet arrived, the same event where Camilla was introduced as Queen, Anne struck. Her words cut sharper than any scandal. Not out of rage, but loyalty. Loyalty to her mother. Loyalty to the truth. One palace staffer, a longtime aide known for his discretion, later confirmed the moment to a trusted royal watcher. He had seen it unfold before Anne's cold glances, Camilla's tight-lipped smiles, the subtle tension that never left the room when they were near. But this time, he heard it clearly. Anne's voice, steady and pointed. "Her Majesty never intended you to be queen." It wasn't just a statement, it was a reckoning. A silent battle made visible in one room, under one gilded roof, with the world watching but never truly understanding what had just taken place. And that's when questions began to surface. Did Charles already know what his mother had said? Had he promised to honor her final wishes, only to rewrite the narrative once the crown was his? Or worse, had he chosen love over duty, rewriting history to suit the woman who waited decades for a crown that was never meant for her? As the palace held its breath, King Charles was left with a heartbreaking decision. Torn between love and legacy, King Charles stood at the crossroads of history. And this time, there was no royal decree to hide behind. His mother, Queen Elizabeth, had ruled with composure and clarity, always placing the crown above personal feelings. And before she passed, she made one final request, a clear, unbending desire that Camilla never be called queen. But as the world mourned and the throne passed, that wish began to blur in the shadows of a very different reality. Because Charles wasn't just the sovereign now, he was also a husband. And the woman he had waited for, protected, and loved for decades was suddenly under attack from within his own bloodline. Camilla had been a controversial figure long before the coronation. Whispers began, but Charles, despite every headline and every disapproving glance from the public, spent years carefully softening her image. He introduced her gradually into royal life, allowing her presence to grow not through force, but through familiarity. charity appearances, public engagements, a quiet transformation of narrative, one that suggested healing, modernity, and redemption. But not everyone was convinced, and not everyone was willing to forget. Still, Charles tried to balance the impossible. He pushed forward William and Kate, framing them as the monarchy's future. He spoke of transition, continuity, and fresh energy, offering the public a clear line of succession they could trust. Some called it strategic. Others saw it as appeasement, a subtle way of calming the storm around Camilla by shining a spotlight elsewhere. But for Camilla, the writing was on the wall. While the public might smile for the cameras behind palace walls, she was growing increasingly isolated. Her circle was tight. Her presence, though acknowledged, was never truly embraced. Charles felt it. And yet, he said nothing. Because what could he say? To defend Camilla outright would be to oppose his late mother's wishes. To remain silent meant leaving Camilla to fend for herself. So, he did what he had done so many times before he walked the line. Publicly, she was queen. Privately, he avoided confrontation. He never corrected Anne. He never addressed the growing whispers about precedence. He simply continued, hoping time would dilute the tension. But time didn't heal anything. And as Anne sharpened her stance, Charles found himself cornered not by enemies, but by those he loved most. The very people who had stood beside him during his darkest hours now challenged the very foundation of his reign. Anne's defiance wasn't a protest. It was a statement. One born not from rebellion, but from duty. And Charles knew, deep down, that silence was no longer a shield. But while Charles hesitated, Princess Anne acted with brutal royal precision. To Camilla, Kate wasn't just the next Princess of Wales, she was the living shadow of Diana. A reminder of a woman the world adored, the one Camilla could never truly replace. From the moment Kate Middleton stepped into the royal spotlight, Camilla sensed a threat not from ambition or arrogance, but from something far more dangerous. Effortless, public affection. Kate didn't have to try. She didn't have to fight to be loved. The people gave it to her, freely, just like they did with Diana. And for Camilla, who had spent years clawing her way out of scandal, the sight of that effortless admiration was unbearable. It didn't help that Kate's background already placed her at a disadvantage in the eyes of traditionalists. She wasn't born into nobility. She wasn't part of the aristocracy. Yet she carried herself with the same grace, if not more, than those who'd spent lifetimes rehearsing it. Camilla, who had battled headlines, whispers, and decades of judgment, watched as the public instantly embraced Kate just as they had once embraced Diana. And just like Diana, Kate threw herself into charity work, tackling child welfare, mental health, and education with sincerity and determination. Camilla saw the headlines, the admiration, the comparisons, and each one was a blow. Behind palace walls, the tension only grew. Camilla, now queen consort in title but never fully in heart, made subtle moves that spoke volumes. One of the most telling? Reports that Kate's parents were once forced to use the servants' entrance when visiting Buckingham Palace, an unmistakable slight. Not a mistake. A message. And Kate got it. She understood. But she didn't retaliate. Instead, she chose silent strength until one moment changed everything. At a royal event, expected to curtsy as tradition dictated, Kate didn't. She simply held her posture and moved forward. It was quiet, controlled, but it echoed through the halls like thunder. That moment wasn't just defiance, it was a declaration. The era of silent obedience was over, and the Queen herself had made it clear. Before her passing, Kate belonged. She had welcomed her with warmth, admiration, and an unspoken approval that Camilla had never truly received. For Camilla, that contrast was crushing. Despite years of trying to win hearts, she still lived in the shadow of Diana. And now, in the EDE silhouette of Kate, the crown didn't ease her insecurities. If anything, it made them worse. Even as queen, Camilla felt like an outsider watching a new generation take root. She had been expected to guide Kate, mentor her, shape her. But she refused. Not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to. And that decision, quiet as it was, spoke louder than any royal address. It revealed a war not waged in public, but behind glances, gestures, and titles. A war that Camilla was losing. The public sided with Kate, but it was William's deep personal wounds that truly sealed Camilla's fate. To Prince William, Camilla was never royalty. She was never family. She was the woman who stood where his mother should have been, and that was something he could never forget and never truly forgive. His grudge wasn't born from protocol or politics. It was personal, and it started long before Camilla ever set foot in the palace as Charles's wife. It began in the quiet, painful moments he shared with Diana when the cameras were off. And the fairy tale was already falling apart. As a child, William bore witness to his mother's anguish. He wasn't just the future king, he was the quiet listener to a woman who had been shattered by betrayal. Diana confided in him, perhaps more than she should have, but she needed someone to lean on. And William, even as a boy, took on that burden. He saw her cry. He heard the stories. He watched her fade from the woman the world adored to the one desperately trying to hold her family together. He loved her fiercely, and he vowed, in his own innocent way, to protect her. From everything, and from everyone, especially Camilla. When Diana died, it wasn't just a loss, it was devastation. His world stopped. And before he could process the trauma, before he could even grieve in peace, Camilla began her slow but calculated entrance into royal life. To the public, she was being reintroduced. But to William, she was being imposed. And that sting, that wound left unhealed, only deepened with time. According to multiple royal insiders, William never truly accepted her. He didn't welcome her. He tolerated her. For his father, for the institution, but never for himself. Camilla felt it. From the very beginning, she feared William. Their first meeting was reportedly filled with tension. Camilla was visibly nervous, shaking. And when it was over, she needed a gin and tonic just to calm her nerves. That wasn't the sign of a warm beginning. It was the start of a Cold War, one that would simmer behind the palace walls for years. Over time, rumors began to swirl that Camilla had shared private details about William and Harry with select media allies. The leaks were subtle, but unmistakable. They painted William as cold, guarded. But insiders knew why he was protecting himself from being used again. His anger grew, especially when Camilla subtly opposed his relationship with Kate. She didn't think Kate was royal enough. That made William furious, because he saw in Kate something he never saw in Camilla: kindness, loyalty, and above all, safety. As William rose in public favor, he did so with quiet determination. He knew that one day he would take the throne. And when that time came, it wouldn't be alongside Camilla. He made that clear not through speeches, but through action. By elevating Kate, by stepping into his role with compassion and grace, by drawing the public's gaze away from the past and into a future without Camilla's shadow. But if Camilla's downfall began with Anne's defiance and William's resentment, it was Kate's quiet strength that dealt the final blow. She was once seen as an outsider. Now, she's the crown jewel of Britain's future. When Kate Middleton first entered Prince William's life at St. Andrews University, few could have imagined the legacy she would build. At the time, she was just another student, attending lectures, walking the halls, and blending into the quiet rhythm of academic life. But fate had other plans. Their bond began with friendship, simple, honest, and rooted in shared experiences far from royal pressure. But as it deepened, it became something neither of them could ignore. It was a love story not born from duty, but from choice. Then, in 2007, everything seemed to unravel. The news of their breakup hit the headlines like a royal bombshell. Speculation ran wild. Was it the pressure? The palace? The press? Kate said nothing. She didn't fight for sympathy, didn't lash out. Instead, she did what no one expected. She held her head high. She carried herself with quiet grace, reappearing in public, with a confidence that stunned the nation. That composure didn't just win over the public, it earned the respect of the palace. And when she and William rekindled their relationship, it was no longer a story of romance. It was a story of resilience, of a woman who refused to break. But resilience alone wouldn't be enough. If she was to stand beside a future king, she needed to understand the machine behind the monarchy. Enter Samantha Cohen, a senior advisor to Queen Elizabeth, and the architect behind Kate's transformation. For months, Kate was trained in silence, a royal boot camp of tradition, diplomacy, protocol, and pressure. She wasn't just learning how to wave or when to bow. She was learning how to carry the weight of the crown without ever wearing it. And while the public speculated about tiaras and titles, Kate was studying history, statecraft, and the art of restraint. Still, no training could prepare her for the relentless media scrutiny. Every gesture was dissected, every outfit analyzed, and every headline brought the same comparison, Diana. For most, it would have been a curse. For Kate, it became fuel. She didn't try to be Diana. She honored her through action, through kindness, through purpose. She shifted from a quiet supporter into a force of her own. And when she chose her causes, early childhood development, mental health, youth services, she did more than lend her name. She showed up. She listened. She led. Motherhood added a new layer to her identity. With the births of George, Charlotte, and Louis, the public didn't just see a princess. They saw a mother, balancing royal duties with bedtime stories and school drop-offs. That authenticity brought her closer to the people. And it brought her closer to the Queen. In time, Queen Elizabeth began to see not just a duchess, but a leader, a future monarch, a woman who embodied grace under fire. And when Kate wore Diana's sapphire ring, or the Queen's brooches, it wasn't for fashion. It was a tribute, a quiet reminder that the legacy of strong women was alive and moving forward. As he taught, Kate's star rises and Anne stands firm. The monarchy is shifting, and Camilla's position has never been more unstable. With secrets exposed, loyalties tested, and the Queen's ghost still lingering in every corridor of Buckingham Palace, one question now haunts the monarchy. What happens next? The battle lines have been drawn not in blood, but in whispers, tradition, and silent defiance. And in the eye of this royal storm stands Camilla. Once the crown's most controversial figure, now its most fragile. Despite holding the title of queen, her presence has grown colder, quieter, visibly excluded from the inner sanctum where true power is shaped. There has been no official demotion, no formal statement from the palace. But anyone watching closely knows something has shifted. The public, once divided, has made their decision. Their hearts belong to William and Kate. The future, as far as they're concerned, doesn't wear gray. It shines with the promise of youth, dignity, and emotional clarity, qualities that Diana once represented, and Kate now carries with grace. Everywhere they go, the people gather, not just to see royalty, but to see hope. A modern monarchy, softened by empathy and sharpened by responsibility. In contrast, Camilla has become a relic of controversy, a chapter many believe should have ended with the Queen's final breath. Behind palace doors, the tension grows thicker. Whispers suggest that Charles, exhausted by years of damage control, may be quietly pulling back from decisions involving his wife. Some say he's considering assigning her public duties. Others claim he's simply waiting, unsure of how to face the impossible choice between personal loyalty and public expectation. Either way, his silence is louder than ever. And in that silence, Anne stands firm, watchful, resolute, immovable. She doesn't need to speak. Her message has already been sent, and it continues to echo through every cold glance and every skipped curtsy. Camilla's legacy now dangles by a thread, fraying at the edges with every passing day. Once defended fiercely by Charles, She now navigates a palace that no longer offers the same protection. Even within the monarchy, alliances are quietly shifting. And looming on the horizon is a moment Camilla can't ignore: William's ascension. What will he do when the crown passes to his hands? Will he preserve the balance? Or will he finally act on the feelings he's buried for decades and strip her of the title she was never meant to wear? There's no royal decree that can predict the answer, because the monarchy has changed. It is no longer ruled solely by bloodlines and ceremony, but by public sentiment, buried truths, and the ghosts of those who still shape its future. And with every crown comes a shadow. It may finally be time for the darkest secrets to surface. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.